Hello, my dear friends. I hope everyone is well. One of the beautiful things of Torah is that we are allowed, and not only are we permitted to do so, but we are encouraged to study Torah from our own perspective, the perspective of our personality, and to delve into Torah and find our own chidushei Torah, our own novel interpretations of Torah. The Chazal say that there are Shivim Panel Torah. There are 70 different primary ways to understand the Torah. That means to say the Torah contains all those 70 different explanations are contained within the body of Torah. It's like a diamond. If you turn it, then you flip it, then you hold it up to the light, and each facet of the diamond catches the light in a different way, and you see something new in the diamond. That's how Torah is. That as the light passes through our own personalities, our personalities serve as a prism. In the end of the Parashas, Noach sees a rainbow. And there's many different explanations. What's the symbolism of the rainbow? But one of the ideas that I think one could say is that a rainbow, the Chumash says, "V'nirashta keshes banan." The rainbow appears in the anan, in the mist. The mist represents the difficulties of life, the hardships and the challenging experiences that we all have in life. But what that accomplishes is that because our experiences are not the same, so the light of Torah is fractionated. That by each person is a prism, and the light of Torah appears in a different color as it emerges from the personality of the individual. The anan representing the person's experience, and through the experience is a keshes, is the broad spectrum of the beautiful array of colors that are in the Torah and in God's revelation. So a person is therefore, each person, because each person is unique, a person has to find his own individual way of understanding the Torah. Luban says, "You should give us our share in Torah." He says each person has his own share in Torah, his own chelek in Torah, and that's the chidushei Torah. That's the novel interpretations that each person has. And I've often encouraged people, write things down. If you think of a pshat, if you think of a new way of interpreting a pasuk, or you have a rayon, an idea, write it down, hold on to it, record it, so that you'll have a permanent record of your thinking. So I want to share with you today a beautiful, what I think is a beautiful explanation of a pasuk in Chumash. I have perhaps 100 svarim in my library. See, there's a lot of svarim here. I have about 100 svarim on Chumash. I have not seen this explanation. Maybe in one of the svarim, I haven't gone through a fine comb, with a fine tooth comb each sefer. Maybe one of the svarim says something similar, but I haven't seen it yet. So I think I want to share with you. I think it's a beautiful explanation. The Chumash describes the impact of the Mabul. All the high mountains were covered. And Vayigva kol basar haromes al aretz ba'ofu v'abehemu v'chaya. All the living creatures perished, the birds and the animals and the wild beasts and the insects. Kol shenishas ruach hayim ba'apav, and all those that had the breath of life, which are human beings in their nostrils, they all perished. And mikol becharava mesu, anyone who was living on dry land died. Vayimachas kol hayikum asher al pnei adama, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu wiped out all existence from the face of the earth. So it's obvious that it was in the deluge there was complete and total destruction. So then the Torah concludes, Vayishar ach Noach, ve'asher ito b'teva. Only Noach and those who were with him in the Teva were able to survive the Mabul. So the question is, why does the Chumash is so precise? Ach Noach, only Noach. Well, of course it's only Noach. Vayishar ach Noach, only Noach survived. If you read the psukim, it says that everybody, all the animals and all the people, they were all destroyed. They all perished. So of course, it was only Noach was in the Teva. He was in the ark, a protected environment. He survived. Why does the Torah have to emphasize Vayishar ach Noach, only Noach? So Rashi quotes the Gemara and Chazal, two explanations. Rashi says that the word ach is limiting. It means that even Noach didn't survive in totality, because Noach was, one explanation Rashi says is that Noach spent the whole day feeding the animals, and he was busy running from one cage to another. And as a result, he was coughing and spitting blood. So therefore, Noach himself was not complete at the end of the Mabul. Vayishar ach Noach, only Noach, meaning even Noach only survived in a limited fashion. The other explanation Rashi says is that Noach once came late to feed the lion, and the lion was angry at Noach, and he mauled Noach, and therefore he was bleeding from that experience. So again, ach Noach means that he was not complete. I explained that the reason why did Noach have to be a zookeeper? It was a miracle that the animals will all fit into the table, the millions of animals. Why couldn't Hashem make a miracle that they would be fed on their own? Why did Noach have to spend the entire period of time in the table running from one floor to the next to feed the animals? So he said because the world community perished because they were selfish. They were thinking only of themselves. Noach had to go to the opposite extreme. I mean, he had to create in the teva an environment of chesed. There was nobody to do, there were no people with whom to do chesed. So Noach did chesed with the animal kingdom. And that's why he spent the entire period of time, 24 hours a day, feeding the animals. But that experience left him maimed and wounded. And therefore the Chumash says, Vayishar ach Noach. That's the explanation that Rashi gives. Here is what I want to share with you, is my suggestion as another explanation, my chiddush of what it means, Vayishar ach Noach. And that is the following. There's a striking contrast between Noach and Avraham Avinu. Noach has no influence on anybody besides himself. He doesn't influence his family. He sets a poor example for his children. After the Mabul, he becomes drunk, and then he rolls in his nakedness in the tent, and he ends up having to curse one of his chum, because he observed the nakedness of Noach. So Noach does not set a good example for his family. And Noach did not have any influence on his generation. Rashi says that Noach built the Teva for 120 years because Hashem wanted that people should ask Noach, what are you doing? And he would say that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry and he's going to destroy the world. And maybe people will do tshuva. How many people did tshuva? They watched Noach for 120 years, and they said to Noach, what in the world are you doing? And it's pointed out that Noach built the boat. You build a ship by the waterfront. Noach built in the middle of his backyard. You can't sail a boat from dry land. So they made fun of Noach. It was Noach's folly. So it's 120 years, and Noach had a chance to explain to them and to be makar of them and to draw them closer. How many people became Baalei Tshuva because of Noach? The answer is none. Not one single person. In contrast, Avraham Avinu had an enormous impact on his own generation. When he left Haran, he took a nefesh shirasu b'Haran. He and Sarah were Megayer. Avraham was Megayer, the Anashim, the men. Sarah converted the women. And they had an entire community that they built, the community of Baalei Tshuva. They were the first Kiruv organization in the existence of the world. So Avram impacted on society. And not only did he impact on the world around him in which he lived, but he also impacted on future generations. God says, "Hamachasani me Avram." How could I hide from Avram the fact that I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? When I love Avram because because he will instruct future generations. And indeed, Avram continues he lived 3,500 years ago. We trace our lineage. We are B'nai Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Every year we come back to the story of Avinu in the beginning of Chumash. Avram continues to impact upon each of us even to this very day. Noach is, when you think of Noach, you think of the Teva. When you think of the Ark, when you think of Avram, what symbol comes to your mind? It's the Ohel. Avram stood outside his Ohel, outside his tent. The difference between a Teva, an Ark, and an Ohel and a tent is that an Ark is intended for isolation. Noach went into his own bubble in the Teva. Nobody else was allowed in the Teva, just Noach, the animals, and his family. It was a limiting experience. Avram Avinu has a tent. A tent is intended to bring people into the tent. And that's why Avram sat Pesach Ha'ol. He sat outside the tent because he was looking, who could he attract? Even on the hottest day, he wanted to bring people in. He wanted to carve them to come into his tent. So that's the difference between Abraham and Noach. Noach built a teva, and Abraham built an ohel. There was only one set of living creatures on whom Noach had an impact, and that was, as reflected in Chazal, V'yisharach Noach, that Noach spent the entire period of time in the teva feeding the animals. So he was a tremendous zookeeper. He did chesed for the entire animal kingdom for a period of an entire year. But that is all the impact of Noach was not on a single person. It was that he was able to sustain the animal kingdom during the Mabul. And that's reflected in Vayisharach Noach, because he was lamed and he was injured because of the difficulty of that experience. So what I want to suggest is that in the words of Ach Noach, in addition to being a remez to the fact that Noach spent 12 months feeding the animals, Vayisharach Noach also means to say that at the end of the Mabul, at the end of that entire period of time, at the end of the experience, who was impacted by Noach? And Noach himself, he went through after the Mabul, it's true, all of civilization was destroyed, but now Noach had a chance to rebuild civilization. He had a chance to teach his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, and he could have traveled from city to city and had an impact on all of society and inspired them and taught them the history of mankind and the impact that their negative deeds had. He could have inspired generations. But the Chumash says, Vayishar ach Noach. When Noach died, all that was left was Noach. The only one that was influenced by Noach was Noach. Vayishar ach Noach. It's true, he had an impact on the animal kingdom, which is also reflected in ach Noach. But you don't leave a lasting impact on animals. Impact is on people. And Noach had no influence on people. He didn't, before the Mabul, not one single Baal Tshuva came from Noach's efforts. And after the Mabul, Noach was not impactful on his family, and he had no hashpah, no influence on the society in general. So all that was left of Noach was Noach. Vayishar ach Noach. That's it. That is the entirety of Noach's life. It was just Noach. There was nothing else besides Noach. And in great contrast, Avram Avinu, we are B'nai Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Avraham's family extends for thousands of years. Who knows how many millions and maybe billions of people are descendants of Avram Avinu, and we are all following when a child is born. The child enters into Briso Shal Avram Avinu, the covenant of Avram Avinu. We are still observing the covenant that HaKadosh Baruch Hu established with Avram Avinu. Avram's impact was not just on Avram. It wasn't Ach Avram, but it was on all society and all of his dependents. And that's the Chumash is emphasizing. Noach, he had, it's true, he was a terrific zookeeper and he fed the animals with great devotion and it took a lot out of him, but it was Vayishar ach Noach. What was left of Noach's life? Nothing except for Noach. That was it. It was that limited. He went into the teva, he locked himself in, nobody else could get in. All that was left was Noach from his life experiences. That's perhaps also the meaning in the beginning of the Parsha. The Chumash says, Noach, each tzaddik tamah darosov. He was a tzaddik in his generation, and Chazal are troubled. Why does it say he was a tzaddik in his generation? Perhaps to make the same point, that there was no extended impact of Noach. He was a tzaddik, it ended in his generation. It didn't go beyond into the next door, into the next generation. There's a tremendous lesson here, a powerful, inspirational lesson, and that is that we need to think about our own lives. Nobody lives forever. Halavai, we should be able to live healthy lives. And Admei Vesrim Shana, we should be able to live 120 years. I hope in Mirza Hashem, we give a bracha to everyone. We should all be healthy and live long lives. But the question will be, when the time comes when we have to depart from this world, what will be nishar? What will be left? What will be the remnants of our life? What will be the impact? What will be the ripple effect of, what will be the hashpah of our lives? Will we be like Avraham Avinu, who built a tent and he taught future generations what it means to enter into his covenant in the Tzur HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Or will our lives be like Noach, that we build our own bubble, our own submarine, we go into our own a room of isolation, and by Yishar Ach Noach, all that was left was Noach? Will it be that all that's left of our life is ourselves? And so, you go to a cemetery. What is left from a person? I'm unfortunately, I'm in the cemetery maybe 3 or 4 times a month. You walk around the cemetery, what is left? There's a bunch of tombstones in the cemetery. And for most people, that's Ach Noach. That's all that's left is the tombstone. And it has the modicum of information, the most limited information: when the person was born, when the person was died. Maybe it says that he was a good husband, or a good, or she a good wife, or a good parent. But that becomes the sum total of what's left of the person. And as Jews, we want to emulate the model of Avraham Avinu. We don't want that at the end of our lives it should be Vayishar Ach Noach, nothing more than Noach himself, but it should be an enormous hashpah that continues on for generations and generations. And I think that that's a takeaway lesson. I think this is it's a valid explanation of one of the 70 ways of understanding Torah. Vayishar Ach Noach. I think it's a beautiful and an impactful explanation that only Noach survived the Mabul, nothing else. And we don't want to follow that example. We want to be modeled after the life of Avraham Avinu, that when the time comes that we take leave of this world, our impact should be felt for generations and generations to come.